Hi everyone, we're going to talk about unfurnished letting versus furnished letting, what it means, what's the differences, why you might do one or the other. So stay watching to learn everything there is to know about furnished and unfurnished property. My name's Neil Harding and welcome to Property Inside.
My name's Mark Ashworth.
So Mark, let's start with what do you do? Do you let your properties furnished or unfurnished, first of all?
Okay, so they're all unfurnished. I find that typically many of the tenants that I have are coming from previous properties. They've already got furniture of their own. I would say that's probably because most of my properties are houses. I think if you've got flats which are up in 10th, 11th, 12th floors, let's say, it may well be worth considering furnished because obviously your tenants may or may not like the idea of moving up furniture onto those higher levels, let's say. So I think it depends a little bit on what your tenant type is. For example, if it was say a one bed kind of bedsit type approach at a slightly lower end of the market, I would consider that perhaps letting them furnished could be an option. But ultimately, if it's a family home and you think that it might be people that are moving from a flat to a house, chances are they've already got some of their own stuff. So it depends. But you know, furnished and unfurnished, typically, obviously, if you're putting in furnished items, then you need to maintain to make sure that they are actually usable and that they are functional and they work. So the bed can't be broken and the washing machine needs to work, etc. And if it breaks down, it's your responsibility. So largely, it's probably better in the grand scheme of things to let your tenants provide their own stuff.
It's a really good point that you've made about flats versus houses. I think that's a really important consideration, and that idea of, you know, flat on the 10th floor or something. I like to take advice from my letting agent for each property that I have, and because they're very well placed to know what a tenant expectation is. And there is a different expectation on flats actually. More often than not, I find that with a flat, and you quite often get a lot of integrated white goods, for example, in a fitted kitchen of a flat. And let's say it's, you know, up a few flights of stairs. So there is more of an expectation, I think, for tenants that you might have integrated white goods such as fridge, freezer, even dishwasher, but maybe a washing machine, which can be ridiculously heavy, right? If you ever had to try and carry a washing machine upstairs. So yeah, that is definitely a consideration. But I think in all cases, I've always provided oven or cooker, hob and hood. In the kitchen, that's as a minimum, and I think that is a requirement actually as well, that is provided. After that, it all becomes down to what you think's needed really to make your property marketable. Of course, you've got to provide a, you know, safe, warm, secure, compliant property, but you know, really whether you provide, let's say, curtains or a blind, or no curtains or blinds at all, but just a curtain pole or no curtain pole, is all down to sort of fine levels of detail. It's a bit horses for courses, I think.
Yeah, curtains are a funny thing really, because they are quite a personal choice. Some people prefer blinds, some people prefer curtains. I think obviously there's a tendency, if you put curtains up in the property and you put a curtain pole up, you know, just sod's law says that they're going to come along and take them down and put something else there instead. Ultimately, you know, you have to make sure that you take detailed images of the property so that you can determine whether the stuff was put there by you or by the tenant. I think we're probably talking more fundamental things like fridges, freezers, washing machine, cookers and things like that. I have had a couple of situations before where a previous tenant has had white goods that they didn't want to take with them. And I've usually put the new tenants in touch with the old tenants to basically do a deal together. If you want to purchase that item from that previous tenant, you can by all means contact them and pay for it separately and keep it, or we can just get rid of it. And in that case, I would usually use something like Facebook Marketplace, and that seemed to work quite well. But yeah, the problem with, obviously, if I'd have provided that washing machine for that person included in the tenancy, then if that ever failed or went wrong or needed replacing, then I would have to replace it like for like.
Yeah, it's down to the landlord's cost then, isn't it? Especially it'll be probably logged as part of the inventory as well. Yeah. Therefore, it's assumed that the landlord's responsible for maintaining it. And I think that's quite important, especially if, like an example that you're just going through there, or if you had a tenant that maybe lived in the property for 8 years, they've just moved out and they've left the fridge freezer there. Well, maybe they left it there because
It didn't work.
It didn't really work very well. So one of the things that I've done sometimes is I've said to a letting agent, look, I'm happy for the fridge freezer to be there for a new tenant, but let's make it clear that if they want that fridge freezer there, then for all intents and purposes, it's their responsibility and they own it, and they can take it with them when they leave the property at the end of the tenancy, because it's not part of the tenancy agreement. Or if they don't want it, I'll happily remove it before the tenancy agreement starts. Yeah. But it's their choice. And then you're almost sort of trying to get best of both worlds. Then you're not putting a tenant off.
You can ultimately gift it to that person, can't you?
Yeah.
It's probably worthwhile saying that when you have your tests done on the property, that you should get it pat tested first, just to make sure that, and which you can actually do yourself as well. You just have to make sure that it's all in good order, good working order, and the cabling's all safe and everything like that. So in summary, really, if you are renting out a property that's unfurnished, the only really thing that you need to provide is, as you said, safe, secure and warm. So obviously it needs to have a boiler or suitable heating. And then obviously the cooker with the hob and the hood. Everything else really is entirely up to you what you provide, and down to the conversation that you have with either the tenant or the letting agent. And if you choose to have something furnished, just consider why you will be putting that stuff in and who it's benefiting. So we do hope that you found that insightful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.